we need to rethink about the function of customer service, and that customer service should actually be at the core of the business. And our business decisions should be based on the feedback that the customer service team gathers. I wanted to have like a very big banner that took up half of the screen on our mobile app, and just have like a really big pretty banner, and also on our website before, huge banner that took up like half the page. And I realized this is horrible for like conversion rate optimization. One of the things that I always say to our marketing team is, what's in it for me? Why should I care? Especially in social media and even in our inboxes on our phones, everyone's bombarded with messages from brands saying, me, listen to me, like buy this.
Hello and welcome to Silent Podcast, where we interview great minds in product management and design. My name is Anastasiya and I'm head of product management and business analysis at Sidon. For our first episode of the podcast, we have a first-time founder and CEO of an e-commerce startup. I'm more than thrilled to introduce you to Jennica Chiang, founder of Shop Suki, a retailer in the Philippines that delivers groceries, pharmacy items, department store essentials, and I'm sure that many other products. She launched the startup right at the beginning of the pandemics, and over the course of 3 years, she gained more than 20,000 customers, making her platform the highest ranked Mindanao incubated app on the App Store. Our team at Sidon had the pleasure of collaborating with Jennica to design Shop Suki digital store and mobile app. And this was one of our beloved projects. I'm sure you'll see why. So Jennica, it's a pleasure to have you here. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
So I'd like maybe to start with your personal story, as I know that you worked for a Korean fashion brand while studying at school and later graduated from London College of Fashion with a degree in fashion marketing. So I'm curious, what has inspired you to switch the domain and launch the grocery store?
Yeah, so I guess this is a little bit different from fashion, but in
Yeah.
some ways, I think it's still very similar, because retail is retail, right? It's about understanding your customers and fulfilling a need for them. For me, the passion has always actually been e-commerce more than
Mhm.
fashion. So I love combining tech and retail. So ever since I've been a student, like from when I was in high school, I was doing internships for different e-commerce businesses, and I really
Mhm.
love the tech side of retail. So I think one of the more formative experiences for me was working for Dune London. It was a shoe company. Their
Mhm.
shoe company. And I worked with the e-commerce team where I got to learn a little bit of everything. So from the digital merchandising side of things, the CRM, email marketing side of things, to the web analytics side of things. And I really loved working with data. So after I finished university, I applied to a bunch of graduate programs across different retailers in the UK. And graduate schemes are, I guess, more common amongst grocers than they are with fashion companies, because most fashion companies only hire for entry level roles in marketing. And I thought I wanted to have a more comprehensive learning experience from different aspects of retail. So I got into Ocado's graduate program, and Ocado, I think, is the largest pure play online grocer globally, who do all their own self fulfillment from their own warehouses. And I think that was really when I fell in love with groceries. Am I in love with groceries? No, I think yes, I love groceries. Because it's been almost 7 years now working in the online grocery space. So
Wow.
yeah.
I would say like your subject matter in this sphere and you like had your studies really correlates with your actual work right now. So looks like you are well prepared to fight this domain. Right. And well, like at the beginning of your journey, have you validated the idea? And because online groceries are pretty different from offline, and people in Philippines, I think that are more used to this offline experience. Have you validated and like somehow researched the market before you started?
Honestly, I think it was trial by fire. So how we validated was really based on circumstance, not really based on thorough planning, right?
Mhm.
So we started at the beginning of the pandemic, and the validation was we threw together. I wonder if I could dig up somewhere the first version of the Shop Suki website. I just chose a random like e-commerce provider, Shopify, because that was a platform that I had experience with, and I thought,
Mhm.
okay, just throw like the top 1,000 best SKUs and rent a van and a driver, and then just work with a partner supermarket and go from there. And I think
Cool.
because of the difficulty at the time of the pandemic, we had a lot of interest in the business. So it wasn't very hard to find users who were interested in testing our service. So I guess in
Mhm.
some ways that is validation, but in a very expedited 1 week time frame.
Wow. So like really fast validation. Like
Really, really fast validation.
cool. So, like, because typically startups go through several steps, starting from ideation, MVP, then searching for investments, go-to-market strategy, product market fit, then scaling, growing, and maturity. So, it looks like you had your MVP tested very fast and just launched it. Maybe you can go over how you actually launched. So, you validated it. Yeah, it works because online groceries has a lot of operations on the back end. Like you actually need to deliver everything, you have to store it somewhere. So it has a lot of this back end stuff, except in addition to this front end platform that users or customers are using. So you had to build the entire business, not only the application. So how did it work?
I feel like I've oversimplified it in my brain now because it has been a few years. But then if I think back, actually, I don't know if you've seen that diagram about like how to draw an owl. It's like, okay, first draw like two circles, and then the next photo is like the whole owl. Um, so I'd say if I break it down, the way I thought about it at the time was like, what are the simplest aspects of this? Which is one, how can people order? Okay, how do
Mhm.
we know what they have ordered and where they lived, and how much would it cost to deliver to them? So that's the most important thing. So that's when you said like the front end. So that's sorted because that's Shopify essentially. It's a third party platform, and I mean that is the ethos of the business, right? So the next
Mhm.
is okay, how do we make sure that we pick the right items in the store? So now that we know what their order is, how do we pick the right items? So nothing about optimization, nothing about like I don't know, finding the perfect route in the store. It was just get the right items. So I guess the simplest way to do that is just print out the orders on a piece of
Mhm.
paper. I think at one point I was just doing it off my phone or we wrote down some of the orders. And the third is it needs to be packed into boxes in a safe way. So we just, I think, borrowed like one checkout counter in the store. And so while we were packing, we were going through that list to make sure that everything that needs to be there needs to be there. And then I guess it needs to get to where it needs to go. So we need to find a way to make sure that all the orders that need to go out that day are loaded onto the vehicle and reach the final customer. So that's actually very four simple steps: order, pick, pack, dispatch.
Mhm.
Um, and this was, I think most of this was just done on paper because when we were doing validation, I think we limited ourselves to like 20, less than 20 orders a day.
Mhm.
And at this time, we had to password protect the website because I think the demand totally like overpowered like what we were able
Your
to do in
expectation.
terms of like yeah in terms of able what we were able to produce because we were just allocated like one checkout counter and I just had I think like one person who was helping me pick, one person who was helping me pack, and then one person who had a driver's license who could take the team to the customers, and that was it. So that was validation. So I think for us the mindset was okay, like how simple can we make this right now
Mhm.
that isn't overwhelming?
Got it. So, as I understand, your company has grew like really fast. Over the 3 years, you right now have 200 employees, which a lot. And like, what was the biggest challenge of such a fast-paced growth? As I understand that your company structure could have changed. So maybe you can also like go or explain us how it also happened.
Yeah, so I think the first 2 or 3 months of go 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 like scale 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 actually it was so inefficient. So it wasn't about like
Mhm.
optimization at all. It was
Mhm.
just about how do we meet the demands of our customers and deliver a great service, even if it meant that, every single day we'd have a stack of like this much paper that we have to recycle that has to go to waste because everything was printed out. There was no technology in place.
Mhm.
Um, so I think the biggest challenge was going from something like that, where everything was about like grow, 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 to like, okay, we've done the growing now. And there's a lot of like inefficiencies and like processes that haven't really been polished. And because of that, there's gaps in terms of where we can sometimes fail with service because we haven't thought things through.
Mhm.
Where we fail in terms of like employee training because there's so many changes that happen all the time. How do you make sure that everybody is aligned that this is the new process now? This is how we do things. So I guess like the boring part. So
Yep.
now we have a team called Operations Excellence, which we established after like a customer who was also a really good friend called me and she was like, I don't know if you've noticed this, but before, everybody I spoke to was really friendly, really upbeat. And now I feel like after somebody from your company calls me, I'm in a bad mood because they don't sound like they're enjoying their day. And I was like, oh my God, this is one of the worst pieces of feedback that, what you could receive from a customer. And I thought, okay. So I went back downstairs and I asked some of the new starters, okay, so like what have you been told about how do you initiate a conversation with a customer and what steps do you go through? And they're like, oh, they just told us to do it as quickly as possible and
Mhm.
make sure that all the amendments are correct. And I was like, okay, but what about the greeting? Like, do you ask how they are? And they're like, no, sorry, but we haven't been told that. I was like, okay, well, clearly there's a gap here in terms of the standards that we're wanting to achieve and the standards that we're able to sustain at scale. So I think that's a really good example of that.
Cool. Yeah. While we're on the topic of customer success and customer support, I know that customers like a big value of your platform, and I like to also touch about how you created this sensation of or feeling of belonging and love because your brand is associated with this positive emotions. And as I understand, like you called your customers Sukis. Actually, I've been very curious. Does it mean anything in Filipinos, or because I checked, it means beloved in Chinese, and I was like, is there any connection?
But anyways, in our language, Suki means loyal customer. So
Oh, mhm, got it.
so that's why everything we do, it's about customer retention and
Mhm.
having like a sincere service, right? Because groceries are so personal. It's not like you buy groceries once a year and if you buy
Yeah.
groceries once a year, maybe we would care a little bit less. But if you buy groceries weekly or you buy groceries every time you get paid, I think it is something really personal because it's part of your routine now. So
Mhm.
that's why it's ingrained amongst everybody in the Shop Suki team how we should treat our Sukis, our customers. That's why
Mhm.
it's in the name as well.
Yeah. And having this value, I understand that customer support is really like big part of your service. And do you outsource these services to other people, or these are all in-house full-time employees who just respond to customer requests and answer their questions?
So yeah, because customer service is one of the most important roles. This is a function that I cannot imagine ever
Mhm.
outsourcing
Yeah.
because I think some companies assume that customer service is like an independent department. So they're there that clean up your mess when you do something wrong.
Mhm.
But actually, I think we need to rethink about the function of customer service and that customer service should actually be at the core of the business. And our business decisions should be based on the feedback that the customer service team gathers. So our customer service team actually leads part of our weekly operations meetings where
Wow.
they let everybody know the most critical customer concerns and there's accountability across every single team about what they would any process changes that need to be made regarding those specific concerns. So it is in our company announcements, like every week, every month, all of the biggest like customer concerns, because I think we just want to be really sincere when we say that our Sukis, our customers, are front of mind, right? So they're definitely, this is one of the most important teams in our organization.
Because as you mentioned, our customers can lead our direction of the product development. They can tell us and hint in which direction to develop and improve. And yeah, having it as a core of your company and of your service is super awesome, just awesome. Right. Also wanted to touch the question of marketing, because from our experience, creating the product could be an easy part. And if you have a clear vision, you just like build it. But the hardest part is reaching out to customers and actually selling it, and maybe like working out the math about having it like generate value and generate revenue. So, can you tell me what marketing strategies have been particularly effective for Shopsuki? Like maybe you relied on word of mouth, or you have like actively promoted the platform. What was your journey here?
So one of the things that I always say to our marketing team is, what's in it for me? Why should I care? Especially in social media and even in our inboxes on our phones, everyone's bombarded with messages from brands saying, me, listen to me, like buy this, sale now. And I think we as consumers have gotten a lot better at blocking these out, right? It's like, okay, if I
Mhm.
care, then I'm going to go out of my way to figure out what it is you're trying to sell to me. But otherwise, I want to get on with my day. Stop selling things to me. So, one of the things that we've tried to do in our marketing is that we want to make it a conversation with us and our Sukis. Like, we want to give them something funny to brighten their day, or start a conversation with them and say, I don't know, like, what are your best recipe tips for Christmas? What are your favorite dishes? Or what meals remind you of your childhood? So it's more of a conversation rather than saying, hey, by the way, we're an online grocery, buy, shop online, download our app. Because then I think they just don't care to, they don't care to see those kinds of ads. And if
Mhm.
they're interested in your brand, they would download your app, and if they see the benefits of that, they would purchase, right? So I think that in terms of our tone of voice and the kind of messages that we send to our Sukis, that's the path that we've gone down.
Mhm. So you're trying
Yeah.
to like reach out with them to them with like real conversations rather than pushing them the marketing stuff and some banners, promotions, but rather to engage them. That's really
Yeah.
nice. Hmm. And one more question I was interested in is about like going back to scaling and growing. I know that you have engaged in partnership with Procter and Gamble and KCC malls, and I'd like also to touch the question, like how did it happen and what benefits these partnership had brought you? Because some startups try to build their businesses by themselves, and do you think that these partnerships have like elevated and boosted your growth? Was it like very important milestone in your development? And like if you take it away, you would not be where you are right now? Or this is a like points that just helped you to grow?
Okay, I think that's a really good question. So let me split the two businesses that you've mentioned. So KCC is
Mm-hmm.
our supply chain partner. So in some ways, we are their e-commerce arm. So of all the partners, I think that is probably the biggest key partnership, because they are our source of goods. So in terms of operations, supply chain, that is definitely a key partner, and we wouldn't be here without them. So on the other hand, we have our suppliers. So we've partnered with P&G, Unilever, Colgate, and a lot of big national brands too here, like NutriAsia. And I think this is a definitely mutually beneficial partnership and super key in the world of groceries. I don't think any grocer out there has thrived without building strong partnerships with their suppliers, right? So I think it has been really great because through e-commerce, we're able to capture a lot of data that otherwise wouldn't be captured in store about how people behave, how
Mm-hmm.
people shop, And this is data that we've been able to share with our brand partners that has been really insightful and useful for their businesses as well. And of course, from their parts, they've helped us with tailored promotions for our Sukis. So it's also very beneficial for our Sukis because they're able to get savings, get special bundles that are only exclusively on our platform.
Hmm. I really like that this is actually beneficial for both sides. So, like you provide data and they provide some like operational stuff. So this is really cool that both sides are beneficial. All right. Moving on to the website itself. Sident has helped you to create websites and mobile application. And I remember when our team was just like, it was mind blowing for them to learn that some common UX patterns, which are common for us, were not properly working for Philippine people. And this is something that we have caught at the very the beginning, like a conceptualization stage when we tested the wireframes. But have you learned something insightful when the platform was launched, that it was not working as expected and you had to iterate and improve the platform?
Yes, definitely. I think without the huge amount of user testing that we've done beforehand, we would have made some very fatal mistakes. So there was some word choices, I think around like discounts or vouchers and
Hmm.
sales about what the kind of words that we use and where they were placed on screens that caused a lot of confusion for customers. And in terms of the flow between our category pages and our product pages, how we initially envisioned it to be and how it is now after all that testing is a lot different because of that feedback. So there's definitely been a lot of surprises. And of course, like we all have our personal biases, right? Like
Hmm.
I'm a very design driven person. I mean, I came from fashion school, so design and aesthetics are very important to me. So there's certain things that I would love on I'm just like looking at the app now. I wanted to have like a very big banner that took up half of the screen on our mobile app and just have like a really big pretty banner, and also on our website before, huge banner that took up like half the page. And I realized this is horrible for like conversion rate optimization because the banner is not really shoppable, right? Like you have to go to
Hmm.
another page, so you're missing very valuable real estate that could be the actual products, like your best selling products on the front of your homepage. So these are learnings that now with the actual numbers that we've seen in terms of add to carts and convert like homepage conversion that I have to admit, is not optimal, like these huge banners. So
Yeah, there are some learnings that we need to consider and learn on our mistakes, definitely. And yeah, also a question. Maybe there were some iterations. Like the product evolves with time, new features are added, and iteration is like just natural process of how everything works. So have you iterated on the design and the platform itself, introducing new features based on some customer feedback, or you just like try to provide more value to customers and add new features, and this is how you evolve and grow the capabilities of the platform itself?
yeah, definitely. Since we've launched, so we finally launched the 2.0 version of the app. We've had
Hmm.
again, a few rounds of focus groups with our users and some surveys, and personally, like watching over the shoulder of, how people interact with the website. And actually, most of us are also Sukis, are also customers, and we do our
Oh,
groceries through here.
yeah.
So there were definitely some personal frustrations in terms of navigation that you would only notice, right? Like once you yourself are a frequent user, or once you've done some very thorough testing that you wouldn't know otherwise just from the design
Hmm.
stage. There's certain flows that are now existing on the app that didn't exist before during the design stage. And I think also we need to understand that there's also development limitations too. So sometimes I feel there is a gap between the design and the development stage. So design is the dreaming part, development is reality. So I think there
I
needs
like
to
how you
be
frame it. That's true.
there needs to be a balance, right? But I'm personally like biased to the design side. Like, yes, like I want us to dream big. I don't want us to be limited by, what are the development possibilities? Because that's what developers are for. not, not to like offend developers out there, but we've had to make some choices that, developers have come and told me like, okay, Jennica, if you want this one button to do this thing, that's an extra $10,000. And I'm like, okay, well, it's okay. We don't
Hmm.
need to do that. We can live without that. So there's certain functionalities that we would need to build another custom database for that has like huge implications on the back end. So these
Hmm.
are the kind of things that I think like after the design stage that uh as a, I guess, like in terms of like business development, we need to have some considerations for,
Hmm.
especially costs.
Yeah. So you just like touched the question of prioritization, like what to consider when you need to make a choice, how to prioritize different features or values that you would like to uh, give to your customers who just like say in customer support that we need this feature or we have this pain and you want to help them, but there are some limitations, like as you mentioned, technical business constraints and like overall planning of the your roadmap and plan of growth. So everything should be considered. That's true. You also mentioned that you track conversions. I also know that you track NPS, like your customer success rate. Maybe there are some other metrics that you keep an eye on, and this is your barometer or measurement of your like health check points and metrics that you like track all the time.
I think definitely for the app or active user base, I think that's very much standard stuff. If there's any
Mm-hmm.
big changes in our active users when we release new versions, or especially now that we've changed to the new app, and if it dropped, that would be really concerning, right? So there's definitely like red
Mm-hmm.
flag metrics that if they drop, I don't know, I wouldn't be able to sleep at night. So definitely one of them is active users. I think uninstall rate is definitely something that people should look at. Maybe sometimes we're so um, focused on installs, but actually, if you're just if your installs are like half of your uninstalls, then there's something wrong. So I think especially with the release of new versions, uninstalls. We also work really closely with our developers. We review all the crash logs. So every week we do reporting on like the top causes of crashes on our app, and then we see what's recurring. And I think
Mm-hmm.
above all of this, it's not as much of a quantitative measurement, but more of a qualitative measurement. Really listening to what our users have to say, because I think people are vocal. People in general, people love complaining more than they like giving compliments, right? And the easy thing to do is like if someone's complaining, you just like cover your ears and put your head down because it's not nice, especially if you know you've worked so hard on something. But the fact that somebody took their time to write a detailed review and raise their concerns show that they actually care about your app and they want to have a good experience and they want to be an engaged customer. So listening to this feedback and making sure that all channels are open to get this feedback is super important. And I think these are the general metrics that we use to gauge that, okay, do we have a good product here?
Mm-hmm. And for like, so you mentioned about the application and for like growing of your business. So you mentioned the conversion rates, like how many people converts to your users. Are there any other things that you can indicate your health by
Okay, so I thought
as a startup?
it was just about the product, the health of the product. I mean, in terms of
Mhm.
the health of the business, I think revenue is probably like the most important thing, because you could have the best product in the world, right, with like zero latency, zero uninstalls, high install rate, but nobody's buying anything, then
Mhm.
what's the point? It's just
Mhm.
you've built a very beautiful showroom with no customers. So definitely like revenue is top of mind, something that we look at. We look at average order value.
Mhm.
How I mean, we've definitely seen an increase in average order value in the past year, but we need to see, because inflation has hit our country quite badly as well, especially in the
Mhm.
grocery space. So this is definitely be one of the contributors to high AOV. We look at unique number of items in each order to see how much of our range our customers are engaging with. And we also look at the engagement with fresh, our fresh category, because somebody buying fresh online is a huge indicator of the trust they have in business. So we have a benchmark for what percent of baskets we want shopping fresh. And we want to continue hitting that benchmark because it is a badge of trust that our customers have, that they want to
Mhm.
buy their fruits and vegetables and meat and fish from us.
Yeah. Is it now that e-commerce has its own specifics? And for instance, Amazon was not profitable for a long period of time because they reinvested into growth. So even though they had positive cash flow, they still were not profitable. They had revenue, of course, but they were not profitable. And it depends on the, I guess, strategy of the company. If they're looking for growth and like entering new markets or expanding and reinvesting, rather than taking out of those money, and like be proud owners of profitable business. Uh, all right. I think that we can move on to your plans. And maybe once we're on the topic on expansion and entering new markets, do you have anything of that in your mind? So right now, as I know that you're focused on Philippine market, but maybe you aspire to reach out to other markets and like enter new areas, not only groceries. So maybe you can share your plans, maybe for the 3 years, 5 years, or long distant ones. Depends what you have in
Um,
mind.
I think there's enough groceries to be sold in the Philippines. We have, I think, almost over 100 million population here in the Philippines. On our island
Wow.
alone, Mindanao, we have 30 million people. So of that,
Hmm.
I think even within our own island, there's a long way to go, right? So grocery, I think at the heart of it is about building great supply chains, especially around fresh, and that's one of our strengths. Uh, so to build a supply chain of that scale is definitely like a big challenge. So in terms of where do we see growth, the next frontier for Shop Suki is actually going into B2B, and serving other smaller grocers, serving hotels, restaurants, and
Hmm.
our other business customers. Because right now we already have quite a few business customers shopping through Shop Suki, but having a experience that's tailored to them is what we're really looking at next. Selling groceries in cases, pallets, delivering via trucks, lorries, rather than the vans that we have. And yeah,
Hmm. So
that's
like
that's what
expanding
we're
the
working on now.
services. Hmm.
Yeah, expanding the services.
Got it. But my last question is about what would you advise to yourself if you go back in time and was just at the beginning of this journey? Are there any advices to yourself?
Advice.
Yeah.
Um, ooh, I think I would double down on the emphasis around having good people. I
Mm.
think I think in the beginning we made some very spur of the moment decisions, or we had to hire very quickly because we had to scale a certain way. And when you
Hmm.
have to hire really quickly, you do make compromises on, how thorough you vet candidates because you're so desperate to fill positions in your business. And sometimes having the wrong person on the team, rather than having no person on the team, can actually have a greater negative impact on your business. So
Wow.
I think that's one of the big advices I would tell myself is to think more carefully about who we should have on the team and the kind of people that we want to help build the team with. That um maybe I tell myself to use the cleanser that I use now because because it's done really well for my skin. And I think just tell myself that one day at a time. I think when you're a first time founder and you don't really have long term perspective, your perspective is really the time from when you started the business until that day that you're thinking about it, right? So every every problem seems a lot bigger than it is in the grand scheme of things. Because the longer you go in business, the bigger the problems that you face. And I think
Yeah.
that helps put things into perspective. Whereas, when we first started, every little problem is like meltdown level problem. But then now, if you come to me with the problems that happened then, I'd probably just laugh it off or say, it's okay. It's okay. It can be resolved. And,
Mhm.
there's such a, sometimes you feel like such a pressure that everything needs to be solved yesterday. Everything needs to be solved now. So that sense of urgency is good in some ways because you do fix those problems faster. But in some ways, that sense of urgency can lead you to make very decisions that aren't really thought through, that
Right.
have a bigger negative impact on the business, like I said, around hiring. So I say maybe like take a breather, take a step back, and really think about, all the implications of the decisions that you're about to make. Um, and but actually, in some ways, like you do need to make a few bad decisions because some of these things that I'm telling you, there's no way you'd learn it unless you've really screwed up. So I guess it's a matter of, if you go into this, you will screw up, but how big of a screw up could you live with,
Hmm.
right? So
Yeah.
it's part of the learning experience.
Yeah. Oh, and just to say that it's all learning curve, and this is the experience that we need to go through and to take and like to experience actually. Yeah. Very nice and insightful message. I think that other startups would also appreciate and learn for your not only for your mistakes, but from your experience and your advices. All right. So thanks a lot for joining me today. Um, and thanks for incredible messages that you shared and your inspiring journey and insights. Excited, we definitely will keep an eye on everything you do, and we wish you continued success in delivering even more value to your Sukis. And I hope that this conversation was helpful to you, our listeners. We'll bring even more insights in upcoming episodes. So don't forget to hit subscribe button for upcoming episodes. See you next time. Thanks.
Thank you.